Hello, everyone in the internet universe. My name is Mia Park. Welcome to In Response Interviews with Intriguing Internalizers. This is my interview series where I am speaking with friends and loved ones, family members from around the world about their internal response to the outside world. There's a lot going on in the outside world. So I hope these interviews are inspiring to you and help you connect with other facets of humanity. Today is June 25th, 2020. And I want to acknowledge that today's the anniversary of the start of the Korean War. Both of my parents survived that war. So I just want to give that acknowledgement that it's an important day in history for some of us. And speaking of an important day of history, we are making history today
Mm.
with this interview. I'm interviewing one of my super bestie soulmates right here in Chicago, Paul Fowler.
Hey, me.
Yay! Hi, Paul. So one of my favorite parts of doing these interviews is talking about how I know these people because it excites me to kind of reconnect with how we connected. So Paul and I knew first met. Well, he didn't meet me, but I saw him. I had just started practicing yoga. This was 2002. And I started taking free community classes at a yoga studio. And Paul was one of those volunteer teachers. And I was like in the front row. I was like, who's tall, skinny guy with the weird white tie cotton pants on? And it was like this Iyengar style. It was lots of holding, and I didn't understand it. And I keep marveling at that because that was 2002 and it's 2020 now. So 18 years later, who knew that the tall, skinny guy in the white funky pants would be like a soul brother. So it's a really special connection. Hi, Polly.
Still tall and skinny. Although this COVID thing's got in my belly, I'm getting a little belly here. It's yeah, it's true.
Are you getting your COVID-15 they're calling?
Yeah, maybe like COVID-19 maybe.
Oh my God. Oh, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
oh my gosh. Paul Fowler, ladies and gentlemen, nothing left to say. And see ya. That was good. So, and cut scene. So, not only being funny and charming, Paul Fowler is actually a very, very deep soul. I'm going to brag on you. I'm going to humble brag about you. You be humble. You're humble. I'll brag on you. He has been a long-time Thai massage therapist and leading his Thai massage teaching school. Multiple classes. He takes a group to Thailand almost every year to study with his Thai massage teacher in Thailand. So he's that dedicated to that healing modality and also the philosophical spiritual part of that. Paul's also a long time and deep Buddhist practitioner and teacher. And along with that, he's also a singer-songwriter. You can see the cool guitars in the background. And also very exciting that I'm so supportive and enthusiastic for Paul is that he's now a licensed health coach, which is Paul's going to fix and help. Shouldn't say fix. He's going to help a lot of people fix themselves, right?
I'm fixing the world.
Yes, that's right. One note, one massage, one Zoom meeting at a time.
Yeah.
Paul, is there anything else you want people to know about you?
You've shown me in a really good light. I think I will just stop right there. That sounds good to me. I have a cat. Okay, so that's very important. Don't forget about Mocoso. He's part of the family.
Mocoso is so family. If you get Paul's newsletter, and you should sign up, there's like a super cute cat. You gotta love a newsletter with a cute cat picture in it. So Paul, let's identify for you what your outside world looks like, and then if you wouldn't mind sharing what your internal response is to that outside world.
Well, I mean, the last few months, as with many people, the outside world has been, or I should say with people that have been fortunate enough to be able to be inside, my outside world has looked a lot of four walls kind of situations. But as I venture out into my personal experience into the world, I start hanging out with friends a little bit more, things like that, back porches, backyards, that sort of thing, really connecting with people. And, I think a lot of what we're talking about here is about connection and the kind of the breaking of connection, the re-engaging of connection. So like connection, I think, is a big kind of theme that runs through both my inner world here through Zoom, and then the outer world through, you know, the actual physical human beings that I'm interacting with. And, you know, from 6 feet away works as well. You know? And, you know, observing our city, observing the larger culture of this country, as a person that is mainly watching it from afar. Like, obviously you can't be everywhere all the time. So most of the things that we see are kind of like filtered through a certain kind of lens, that we're watching. So, you know, I get that just like everybody else. And then I have my own kind of like perception about that, you know, which it maybe is a little different from, let's put it this way. I think I've been thinking about your questions and your interview series. And I feel like, again, when a time like this happens, like connecting to my spiritual practice is really what I've been doing. And, you know, I've really entered into a strong phase of spiritual practice, maybe this last 5 or 6 months, because I've engaged even more with a particular teacher that I have that's been very influential in teaching me the practice. And so, so I'm finding the practice very helpful. But what's interesting is that, like, I think a lot of times when we think about spiritual practice, we think about, oh, there's really stressful times out there, and so our spiritual practice is going to help us kind of like chill out and calm, be a little more centered while we're dealing with it. And that is an aspect of it, but to me, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing, I think, in the spiritual practice is the lens with which you see the things that are happening. In other words, it's a way to kind of like separate from the memes or the where we are, particularly in this time, and seeing a larger, tested, systematic approach to understanding who we are in relationship to ourselves and to the world. And so that oftentimes is at odds with the kind of maybe groupthink kind of thing that happens naturally just naturally, right? So it's like, it kind of like, it's like a slap in the face, and it'll like wake you up. So the example that I'm thinking of, and that really, like, for instance, the idea of compassion, right? And the idea of compassion is, you know, a lot of people can get behind it, right? Like, it's like, oh yeah, feeling like seeing suffering and feeling a softness towards it, wanting to help, obviously, right? When we see George Floyd pinned on the ground, like, compassion naturally arises. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why it's been such a powerful, it sparked such a powerful movement, and sparked so much deep contemplation or recognizing or awareness in so many people that maybe weren't aware before, because they saw it happen, and suddenly that natural sense of compassion like arises. And not only that, you start recognizing and extrapolating beyond that. So it's not just that moment or that thing that we can feel, oh, that poor guy, or that horrible situation. It's more like, oh, we see that horrible situation, and then we start like having a larger sense of compassion, going, oh, other people are suffering too, similarly, or what are the questions that we have around this? So, however, the challenge is, and where the spiritual practice really, because actually that's not that hard. Like, anybody pretty much will look at that video and have a response that's like that. As human beings, we do that naturally, right? That doesn't really take great spiritual practice or growth to be able to feel that or understand that. But as I always say, with compassion, you know, compassion isn't something you dole out like popcorn or something like that, or like I'll give you a little bit, I'll give you a lot, I don't give you any. Like that's not how compassion is presented in the Buddha Dhamma practice, right? So like compassion is for everybody.
Can you explain to people what Buddha Dhamma is?
Buddha Dhamma, well, I use that word as, it's basically Buddha means like enlightenment or, so enlightenment, and then Dhamma means the practices leading to enlightenment, right? So Buddha Dhamma. And so you could say Buddhism, but I think Buddha Dhamma is kind of like it's a more accurate term.
Okay, thanks.
So in the when you're talking about compassion, and I oftentimes say the story, it's easy to have compassion for a dog that's being kicked, but a lot harder to have compassion for the person that's kicking the dog, right? So like we think of like a situation where somebody is aggressing or there's some sort of, hurt being imposed on somebody else. And so we naturally have compassion for that which is being hurt, the baby, the kid, but we oftentimes have judgment and anger towards the person that is doing it. So here's the spiritual practice. How do you develop compassion, not just for George Floyd, but for the officer that murdered him? Okay. And to give equal amounts of compassion to both. And that suddenly, all of a sudden, compassion isn't like, oh, of course, yes, compassion, da, da, da. It's like, no, this is hard work, because to have a compassionate society, we have to have compassion for all beings on whatever side of the kind of like hurting victim, aggressor, like continuum that we're on. Everybody is in pain and everybody's hurting. And so like, that's a deeper recognition. And this period of time has given me an opportunity to like go back to the practice to be able to see and practice these sorts of things. So
thank you for that. And that's such a great reminder that real spiritual work is work. It's not like you meditate, you have a meditation practice and everything's better. Things get more intense when you meditate, I think. When you get deeper, in my lineage, we talk about pressure, that we need the pressure in order to change. And the Tantra lineage is also like that. We call that like fire. Fire is that pressure of transformation, that's heat, right? I think that challenging ourselves to have compassion for the quote unquote enemy is a great task to put ourselves to, because you're right. I like this saying, hurt people hurt people. So as much as we want to vilify all the people that have been continually killing Black people for hundreds of years, you're right. There's something about them that makes them want to actually hurt another human being, which indicates that they're very broken.
That's right.
So along that line, how do you, can you give advice on how somebody can do that? How can someone have compassion for the cops that killed Elijah McClain? That kid in Colorado, that sweet, gentle kid. How do we cultivate compassion for the cops that killed him? Because he himself was such a compassionate young man. He played violins to stray cats in cages to soothe them. And he happened to be Black. And he was killed by white cops. Like, what do we do?
Yeah, very difficult. I mean, for sure. This is not an easy kind of idea. And oftentimes, like, there is kind of like a fake it till you make it aspect of it. Like, the first thing you have to do is believe that spiritual path, that wisdom that has been kind of like cultivated and refined and taught through the centuries, you have to trust it. That's the first thing. Because if you don't trust that what I'm saying here is correct, then so the first thing is trust in the practice, trust in the belief that that this way of thinking is actually correct, even though it's quite difficult for us to practice it or kind of like embody it right away. All right, so that's first. Second would be studying the practice, studying the practice. So like, because what the study of the practice recognizes is that we all are kind of like an accumulation of our karma. In other words, all these things that have kind of, the idea is that this is not personal, right? This is not personal. This is like, we take actions based upon our habits, our conditioning, all the things that made us who we are. And so it's recognizing the impersonal nature of these things. And again, these just, you kind of like learn the practice in a certain way, and then you have to, through meditation, concentration, and understanding of how things work, you kind of move to that conclusion. But again, it's basically has to do with believing in the practice, studying the practice, and then actually practicing it. You know.
It takes work.
You know what? You're totally cutting out. I can barely see you, and I can't hear you.
Can you? I'll keep chatting.
Okay.
Can you?
Okay. There you go.
Okay,
now
better.
I can hear you.
Yeah, man. My internet. I'm lucky to have internet, but when it gives out, it's a problem. Okay. So I also want to clarify that cultivating compassion for someone who triggers you does not deny we're not saying don't feel the feels, correct? We're not saying suppress your anger because you're supposed to have compassion for the bad guy.
Okay, so that's interesting. So that's one level, right? So so in other words, we like compassion, like the way, okay, this is interesting for me because this is a fairly new learning for me. Like I used to teach compassion, practice compassion, a way of feeling with another human being. In other words, like if somebody was hurting, then I'd feel what it feels like for them to hurt, right? In order to like connect to them, to be in their shoes, right? And that was how I was kind of taught the practice of like compassion is like not just pity for that poor person over there, but more like feeling with that person and like going, whoa, that's tough, that hurts, that's painful. And then feeling that and then going, oh, okay. And then developing compassion from that, right? But actually compassion, true compassion is a step beyond that. True compassion actually doesn't come from feeling that stuff. It actually comes from the recognition that that stuff is true. You know it. And so it's a certain kind of wisdom that you're developing that recognizes suffering, that recognizes that we're all suffering, but it doesn't have to necessarily feel with it because you know that it's happening. And so there's and again, it doesn't mean a detachment, and it doesn't even not mean acknowledging the fact that you're angry. Of course, if you're angry, right? But at the same time, you can recognize the problems that anger, if you want to like really investigate it, you can recognize that problems that anger causes for you and causes for other people. And so therefore, because ultimately, when you talk to like, when the Buddha like reached enlightenment, one of the things, that basic things that he like overcame was what they call the taints or whatever, like the anger, the jealousy, the pride, like all of these aspects that are so, stimulating for us. Those were overcome. And again, through wisdom, through understanding of their nature, of their fundamental nature. You know? So
yeah, see, that's one interesting thing about Buddhism that, the Dalai Lama famously says, as we all know, that Buddhist is an intellectual kind of approach to spiritual work, which is why I love that there's so many lineages, because some people are more heart-centered and they can be like the tantrikas or the people that kind of go through that. And that's not saying they don't have wisdom. But I recognize in what you're saying, and from what I understand in the practice of Buddhism, it is a more wisdom-based lineage as opposed to heartfelt, which is something like I understand Tantra to be.
I don't know. I think that the yes, the wisdom though comes from a connection to the heart, and it comes. In other words, it's not divorced. It's not like
No.
this thing over there,
Yeah,
and
and I'm
those
not
are those
saying
things
that.
over there.
Yeah, for sure, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but I do want to acknowledge. I mean, I got that from the Dalai Lama, who was just like, "Yeah, Buddhism is for thinkers. It's for people who like to live up here." Which is interesting when I saw him say that, because again, you can't separate things. A spiritual practice is like dealing with everything. We're dealing with life here. We're in the world, so we deal
Right.
with our emotions, we deal with our bodies, we deal with our minds.
Sure.
But because he talks about Buddhism being a cerebral or like a thinker person's practice, he himself is such like seemingly like his emotion seems gentle, so it definitely is proof that that kind of deep practice brings it all together. So two things. One, we're almost at time, but I want to acknowledge that you have a question, Paul, in the comments.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see it. Marjorie Gutierrez says, when you know there are actually evil people directly involved in some of what is going on, how do you process? So how do you answer that, Paul?
Well, I'd answer by like kind of really investigating, what do you mean an evil person? Like that's a label that you like put on somebody. And like we have to be careful about labeling in that way. People are many things. There's many aspects to a person, what makes up a person, right? And it's easy and somewhat dangerous in a way to start saying this person's evil, this person's good, this person's, like you really lose the nuance, and you really lose the fact that we are all a mix of things, and we all have ultimate potential to do horrible things, and we do all have ultimate potential to do great things. And so that's where I would start with that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Good
That's
question.
great. Yeah, thank you, Marjorie. That's a great question, and I agree with you. Good and evil. I don't think anything is binary. I think everything's a multi-dimensional existence that we live in. And the other thing is, I have always loved the way Paul Fowler says potential. It brings potential to potential. I texted Paul yesterday saying, I can hear you say potential. It's awesome.
Potential.
Yay!
Potential.
Yay! Potential. Because we have so much potential. But
Sure.
Thank you so much. We are at time. Is there any last message you'd like to leave us with, oh wise friend?
No, man, just, I hope everyone takes care of themselves the best they can, and keep working on, whatever your path is, whatever your spiritual practice is, just keep heading back to it. Keep looking at it as a way to guide you in the challenging times that we're in, because there's a lot of, these practices have been through many challenging times, right? And come out the other side. So yeah. Great.
And Kareed, our dear, lovely Kareed says, thank you, me and Paul. Girl, we miss you. So thanks, everyone. And again, I want to encourage you to check out Paul's many multidimensional work. He's a podcaster. He's got that health coaching business that's going to officially launch soon. Definitely a singer-songwriter. And of course, he's got the Blue Lotus Thai healing studies school, where you can receive body work from him, well, at some point in the future, and also learn how to teach it. Maybe I'm saying these things based on information pre-March 2020. I don't know what's going on.
I don't either. No idea.
But anyway, thank you.
Can I say the podcast, the name of the podcast? Because actually, I'm dropping Mia's podcast, that my interview with her on Friday, so which is tomorrow. So it's the Chicagoland Yoga Teachers Podcast, and so check it out.
Yay! See how friends do? We see each other and we honor each other. And I honor you, brother, so much.
Same.
Okay,
thank you for doing this.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thanks for watching. And by the way, if you enjoyed this interview series and want to help me sustain it, I've got donation information on my website, and also above on Facebook and below down there on YouTube. So thanks, everyone. Bye. That was